Here, Dr. John Higginbottom, whose brainchild this Advanced Practice website was, so we're very grateful to him. You'll see myself, you'll see Manny, who's in the background doing great technical support and remember to turn on the record button, and bless her heart. We also see Jordan Clark, who really helps us with our Advanced Practice website. So without him, we would be in big trouble. So he's working in the wee hours of the morning, I know last morning, to make sure that we're all up and running. And then, of course, on the right, you'll see Jen Cusack. So Jen will be running the next 2 sessions with the Wellness Recovery Action Plan. So that's your little team, and we wish you well today. You know that really we are originally funded by the Ministry of Health here in British Columbia to provide leadership, education and guidance to mental health field, to develop and put effective evidence-based psychosocial rehabilitation practices into place. And you can see really we're hoping to bring you the best evidence. Please know that with the help of Dr. Simon Davis, we do have an annotated bibliography, most recently published approximately 4 months ago on the best and promising practices, so that you'll find in the resource section on our Advanced Practice website. So that's another example of what we're doing. And also we've been doing lots of collaboration with different organizations. Most recently, we're planning to do a session for Vancouver Coastal Health in August around tertiary health. So that's part of our role as well. So this is a note. Please do let us know how we're doing. After this session, you will get an evaluation notice. Please let us know. Give us the feedback. Let us know if you would like to present. We are so very grateful to all of our presenters who really get a thanks for their time. Sadly, we do not have money to pay people for their good work, but we are very, very grateful to everybody who just affords us the opportunity to get a glimpse into best and promising practices. So if you're a person who's just heading up some innovative practice, some things that you're doing in your worksite, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to work with you to develop a webinar. And thank you to all our past presenters. We could not do this work without you. So thank you. So please do let us know how we're doing. If we're any good or rotten, as our old boss, Kim Calciferri, used to say, we really need your feedback. Thank you. It is now my great pleasure to introduce you to our presenters today. So the first person who will be speaking with us is Dr. Tal Yaros, who is a professor at Occupational Science and Occupational Therapy in University of British Columbia. Her research stems from disability studies focusing on investigating barriers to full participation of diverse groups of people with disability. Most recent endeavour is heading an international interprofessional consortium, that's not easy to say, working to increase the inclusion of people with disabilities, in particular in health and human service workforce and society, and the subsequent impact on quality of life, social justice, and development of human capital. We also have Mr. Michael Lee, who many of you will know of being a really great participant in our ongoing webinars. He's a senior instructor here as well at UBC, which is where we all are this morning, at the Department of Occupational Science and Occupational Therapy here in British Columbia. And in addition to being an OT, he is also a keen advocate of psychosocial rehabilitation. As an instructor, he's interested in promoting students' access in their studies as well as to their well-being. In the past decade, he's creating mental health awareness initiative here on the campus, enabling students to advocate for their own mental health and identifying and promoting teaching practices that fosters students' well-being. Next, we have Jennifer Gagnon, who will not be with us today, but I know has contributed a lot to this work. She has a PhD in political science and is a research coordinator for the Inclusive Campus project we mentioned under Michael's work. Her research is interdisciplinary and embraces a broad range of topics in political theory, classics, disability studies, and gender studies. Her main area of research is in the intersection between ancient political thought and disability studies, especially as it concerns gender, inclusion, and exclusion, and the visible and invisible disabilities. She's also a senior sessional lecturer at political science at UBC. So great to just have this intersection of people coming from different educational backgrounds. And finally, we have Dr. soon-to-be doctor, there you go, good Freudian slip, Miss Laura Yvonne Bulk. So Laura is a practicing occupational therapist, a recent graduate in a Masters of OT program, and a current PhD student, hence my slip, in the Department of Occupational Science and Occupational Therapy here at UBC. Laura offers a variety of perspectives on the topic at hand. Her research activities, including working with Dr. Yaros, on the Inclusive Campus project, aiming to promote inclusion in the health and human service professional education. And other research areas include exploring experiences of blindness, promoting a sense of belonging, and addressing end-of-life care issues. All of this is with the aim of promoting a sense of flourishing, human rights, and social justice. So first we'll have Dr. Yaris and Laura speak to the slides, just as I make that transition. And just to be aware, we're really keen to have your presentation today. So we will just also be doing up to 10 polls today. So if you can just bear with me as I move in and out of those different pods. And if I'm doing it right, I'm going to be able to publish the results so you will see them. So good luck to me this morning. But with that, I'm just going to pass it over to Tal, who will...
Hello everyone, I hope you hear us well. So as I said, my name is Tal, and I'm really pleased to be here around Inclusive Campus. Okay, so we'd like to start first with a poll asking you, what do you think is the percentage of students with disabilities in universities in general? And I'm imagining Regina is organizing the poll.
Yeah, I'm working on it.
There you go. Now you can see it on the screen. So feel free to respond to whatever the percentage you think is the appropriate one. And we'll collect your responses afterwards.
Let me know when you want to close
I think majority voted. Okay, so it looks like most of you think that it's 20% of the students have a disability, and in fact, the reality is that only 5% of the students are registered at the university having a disability. So compared to the percentage of people with disabilities in the general population in Canada, which is around 14%, we see that the students are underrepresented. We also have to bear in mind, though, that many students who have a disability prefer not to register with the university due to different issues such as disclosure. Still, this is a very shocking percentage showing how underrepresented students with disabilities are. Our second question is, what do you think is the percentage of clinicians with disabilities? And when we say clinicians, we talk about clinicians who work in any of the health or human service professions, such as OT, PT, medicine, nursing, social work, teachers. The majority of you think it's around 12%, I guess. So it was really hard to find statistics, but based on statistics that was reported by Kai, the percentage of clinicians with disability in the health profession is 4%. Again, this is an indication of how people with disabilities are underrepresented in those professions, and also at the same time we have to bear in mind that many people with disabilities who work in the health professions would not disclose that they actually have a disability. So our Inclusive Campus team is really interested in the whole area of representation of students and clinicians with disabilities in the health professions. And one of the reasons is that when you look at the potential of being employed, there is a very strong association between education and being employment. So for people with disabilities, this relationship is even intense and stronger. At the same time, as I showed before, there is still a very low enrollment and first-hand drop out of students with disabilities. And this all of this is in spite of initial changes in the legislation around the world since the UN passed the resolution around people with disabilities. And given those changes in the legislation, there is also a development of access and support programs within the higher education. Having all this infrastructure, there is still very low enrollment of students with disabilities, and many of them need to drop out very early in the program. As I mentioned before, our team is especially interested in the health professions, and the reason for that is that health professions, if a student goes to a health professional program at university, the chance of being employed is very strong, since those health professions provide the students with a profession they can actually start practicing in. At the same time, the students have to face both academic and clinical contexts, which increase the complexity for people with disabilities, additional barriers, more complex context. In addition to that, there is a tension between meeting competencies and providing accommodation for people with disabilities. Many people, there is a whole discourse in the health professions where we provide accommodation. You might not see the full potential or the full competencies of the students with disability. Another source for tension is while health professions talk about wanting to increase the diversity among our profession, we also want to protect the uniformity of what is our profession and how we all look the same. So those two tensions and the barriers are again causing an underrepresentation of people with disabilities in the health professions. So our team started to investigate this about 4 years ago. And we're going to share with you some of our findings. And we're going to start with 2 quotes just to give you the taste of it. And this is a quote from a faculty member who said, "There is a lot of sympathy and empathy and helping for visible disabilities. If there is something less visible, then doctors are the least sympathetic of the bunch. It's like, get going, step up, sink or swim," kind of a mentality around in medical school. And I'll pass it on to Laura, who's going to continue to present that.
All right, we also have a quotation from, oh, there we go, I'm in the video now. We also have a quotation from a student that we'll share with you. So Pam says, "I've had a hard time voicing my needs because the department will say, well, that's what we're about, that's our game. If that doesn't fit for you, then maybe this isn't the right area for you. I know that I can do this. It is just hard to learn that way." So now I'll share some of the various findings we've had from talking with students and clinicians and faculty and so on. So one of them is sort of a picture of what it means to be a person with a disability. So we've found that there is heterogeneity, so meaning there is wide variety in this group of people who have disabilities. People described the diagnoses and the labels and those kinds of things. So this is sort of a description of disability and their experience. They also talk about having various trajectories and different sequelae or different consequences or things that come out of having a disability. And those can be very different for different people. Whatever their label, even if they have the same label, sometimes that trajectory or those consequences or outcomes are very different. And then they also talk about a shared experience of disability. So this is something that we've called the dimensions of disability. So things like being invisible or less visible or more visible. And I'll talk a little bit more about the various dimensions. And also there's this shared experience among people who have disabilities of solidarity and of needing to stand up and advocate for their rights. And that's part of that shared experience of disability. No matter the heterogeneity or the diversity in this group, there is still some shared experience. And then we also have heard about institutionalized essentialism. So what we mean with that is basically the institutions see all these people who are very different as the same, and this leads to having cookie-cutter approaches to accommodations. So in terms of the heterogeneity of the disability experience, this slide features a table that shows the number of people who reported various labels or descriptions, followed by the label or description. So I won't read all of those examples. You will have access to the slides. But it just shows the wide variety of experiences. And some people reported, most people reported more than one of these things. And then that shared experience, so those dimensions of disability that are shared across people who identify by different labels or names. So things like a lot of people said they knew their diagnosis, or they talked about the process of getting a diagnosis. Those ideas of it being both physical and mental, and so on and so forth. Again, this slide also features a table that you'll have access to. So our conversations with students who have disabilities. So far we've published a couple papers, and so you can look at those online. You're welcome to do that. I'll touch a little bit on some of the things we share in those papers. So one of the things that students talk about is needing to legitimize their ability to perform, so to be a good student or a good clinician. Disabled students and clinicians also experience marginalization, and I'll get more into the different aspects of both of those. And then stakeholders also questioned the citizenship of people who have disabilities, and this is a paper we're just working on getting published, so I won't go as in-depth about that one, but basically it's things like challenging the autonomy and the rationality and the productivity of people who have disabilities. So legitimization, we have three sort of ways that people are legitimizing themselves. So one is through negotiating the label of disability. Another is selective disclosures, and finally advocacy. So some students choose to embrace this disability label, and they see it as something that's useful because it helps them gain access to the accommodations that they need. Others choose to reject the label and don't identify as someone with a disability. Part of this is to perhaps avoid the stigmatization that comes with the label, but sometimes it comes at the price of not receiving accommodations that they need. So Rose, one of our students, spoke of negotiating her disability label. She said, "There have been a few times where, if someone's given me a lot of information and I'm having a hard time keeping track of it all, I'll say, no, actually, I have a disability myself, and my problem is processing a lot of information at once. And I'll say, so I'm letting you know now, and I apologize if I ask you to maybe repeat some things." And most of the time, people respond and they're like, oh, that's just human. So here Rose is accepting the disability label, and she's using this acceptance to legitimize herself as a good student. Emma, another student, said, hearing impairment is a really oppressive and negative term. There's a lot of negative connotations with that term. The university still, though, uses the term hearing impaired, and that needs to change. We don't look at ourselves as someone with a disability. So here, Emma is rejecting that disability label. She's separating herself from the category of people who have disabilities. And thereby she's perhaps attempting to avoid the stigmatization that's associated with the label. And she's simultaneously reinforcing that stigmatization by separating herself from that group. So through this process of rejecting the disability label, she's again legitimizing herself as a good student. So whether people are accepting, rejecting, or maybe renegotiating, this process of negotiating the disability label is used to demonstrate legitimacy as a good student and as a good future clinician. Each of those choices, of course, comes with a variety of consequences. So rejecting may reinforce discrimination against those who do embrace the label, and it may also stop someone from getting the accommodations that they need. So the next sort of theme that we've talked about is selective disclosure. So students may use selective disclosure to manage, to an extent, how they're perceived by others. So this can be something that's real or something that's imagined, but they choose to tell more or less about their disability in order to manage the perceptions of others. So in order to gain accommodations, students need to disclose, at least to some extent, but they make choices around how much, when, and where. And keep in mind that this isn't a one-time thing. As people with disabilities, we disclose on a daily basis. and to the same person over and over again, depending on the situation. So Sarah indicated that I found in a way that there's less problems when I just disclose. Like if I don't, there are a lot of misconceptions, and people say, oh, you're lazy, or you're just weird. Sarah felt that she needed to disclose in order to legitimize herself as a good student, because otherwise people were making negative assumptions about her character. Rose indicated that her clinical instructor said, be very careful who you share with. It's better to share with less than more. This indicates that her clinical instructor may have perceived disclosure of the disability label as a threat to Rose's legitimacy in the eyes of her colleagues. Therefore, Rose was advised to avoid disclosure in order to maintain the perception that she could be a good professional. Finally, advocacy was another theme that came out of our conversations. So students discussed various ways in which they need to advocate for themselves in relation to disability, and times at which they choose not to engage in advocacy. So one striking example is that indicates that students need to advocate for control over their own practice. So they describe needing to advocate in order to have a say in what kinds of accommodations they would receive and what the process would be like. So unfortunately, some students described giving up eventually after trying several strategies to advocate for their needs, and thereby they were denied the accommodations that they need. So Wendy spoke to this, saying oftentimes the professors aren't using the microphone that's in the lecture hall. They are just projecting with their voice. I mean, on my part, I could say something and get them to use it, but it comes to a point when you don't want to conflict with their teaching style as well. You can't be expected to get full access always. You have to go in knowing that you're not going to get everything you need. So Wendy indicated that she chose not to engage in advocacy, saying that you have to accept that sometimes you're not going to get everything you need. Conversely, Lena advocated strongly for her needs. Well, I had a meeting with my program. We sat down and just kind of discussed this whole scenario and situation and what my options were. And so we discussed the attendance piece, excuse me, and they informed me that there is an attendance policy. I said, well, no, there's not. There is an attendance expectation. Your policy is we expect you to attend class. That's not a policy. That's an expectation. I'm sorry, I'm not living up to your expectations. And she laughs, which I don't think they loved. But at the end of the day, I'd love to say that I could go to every class and be that student, but I can't. So students indicated that engaging in advocacy sometimes added an extra burden to the work that they're doing. All right, so the next piece that we have found from our conversation was around marginalization, and this was something we heard from both students and clinicians. They've talked about, and some of this is kind of the underlying conversation, that there are two discourses or conversations or narratives within society. One is a narrative, a dominant narrative about people who have disabilities, and the other is a dominant narrative about people who are professionals. So people who are professionals are generally thought to be competent, they're authoritative, they're healthy, independent, and they care for others, or they're service givers. But on the other side, or conversely, disabled people are considered to be defective, dependent on others and needing others, to be helpless, and so on. So there seemed to be this sort of incongruence between these two statuses, these two narratives. And the question was, can you be both of these things, since they are so incongruent? So marginalization, in case you're not familiar with the term, so it's a process through which margins are created, they are defined, and they are enforced. And we found that this process occurs through discourses about disability, structural discrimination, and imbalanced interactions. And I'll touch just briefly on each of those. We have lots of quotations, and I love sharing from the actual stories of people who told us about this. I won't read all the quotations, but again, you'll have access to these slides. So this discourse around disability, this involved stigmatizing people who have disabilities, dehumanization, and also talking about how having a disability is a permanent thing, and it is a permanent mark on someone. So I'll talk to you a little bit about what Daisy, who's actually a faculty member, said. She said that there's this huge stigma attached to people who have disability, like it's your fault, or that you're not whole, or you're not complete, you're not doing the best job possible. And we have a couple other quotations you can read on your own time. So the second theme that we found is around structural discrimination. So this was where structures in the university or within the workplace discriminated against people who have disabilities, whether this was intentional or unintentional on the part of people making the structures. So we talked about things like inflexibility, there's a lot of red tape, and there are a lot of assumptions within those structures, assumptions about ability. And this harkens back to one of the quotations I've already read around expectations of attendance in class. And so that is an assumption that everyone who enters this program should be able to do that. So I'll share, I'll let you read those quotations on your own again, and I'll share about institutionalized essentialism, which is kind of another aspect of this structural discrimination. So this is where, so essentialism basically, they're seeing all, the institution is seeing all people with disabilities or with a certain label as sort of the same. They have this essential character or characteristic that makes them all the same. And therefore they use a cookie cutter approach to accommodating people's needs. So Tricia said, like, just all disabilities are the same. Put them in one group. Especially in the past, they would do that. And unfortunately, we've heard that it's not just in the past, but it's still happening today. All right. So another aspect.
I would just jump and say that this comes in a very strong contradiction to what Laura said about the heterogeneity of disability among students and clinicians, how they're so different. So.
Thank you, Tal. So another aspect of this institutionalized essentialism is sort of asking, do you really have a disability? So if someone doesn't exude that essential quality that is the disabled person or the person with that particular label, there's this questioning around, do you actually have a disability? Sort of, are you taking advantage of the system? So Layla found this. She said, I phoned up the Disabled Transportation Services and I said, I wouldn't mind getting a ride once in a while. I was criticized quite badly for that, for using that service, because I wasn't in a wheelchair or something. So she didn't exude that essential quality. So she was questioned, like, why are you using this service? Taylor said, having a hidden disability is like, it's just different than a physical disability. They find out, like, oh, you're doing services at the Disability Services Office. Do you really have a disability? Or are you just like to get the services? With hidden disabilities, people don't believe you because I can hold a conversation. They think that I don't really have a disability. So the third theme that we found around marginalization of people with disabilities is this imbalanced interaction. So this is where there's a power imbalance that's very clear in the interactions that disabled students are having with faculty, with peers, with clinical instructors, and so on. So one aspect of this is that they were sort of managed or controlled by others. The supervisors knowing up front that a student has a disability were very appreciative. that they knew that this is what's coming and were absolutely keen to accommodate. So Kathy, one of the faculty members, said that. And the underlying idea there is that the student with a disability needs to disclose, and they really like it when they disclose because then they know what's coming, quote unquote, so that they're able to sort of manage the situation, which shows a lack of trust that the person with a disability can possibly manage themselves. I'll let you read the rest of those quotations as well for the sake of time. And I'm going to let Tal next speak to a review of policies that is happening.
Sure. So in addition to talking with students and clinicians or stakeholders, we also reviewed policies, specifically in the medical schools across Canada. And we found quite a dooming picture where while all universities provide an extensive and very well done in-class for the didactic kind of teaching accommodation, there is no clear description of accommodations for the clinical context for students in the medical school, and that probably true also for other health professions. And only 4 out of the 14 schools across Canada have a specific accommodation office within their Faculty of Medicine. And it's mostly dealt by case. And based on our experience, we know that many of the accessibility advisors at universities don't really know how to help students accommodate them in the clinical settings. Okay, so we have talked about a lot of things today. I hope you're not too overwhelmed. And remember, keep your questions in mind. We're happy to share more. But this can have a lot of different implications. So some of those short-term implications that have already been happening, as Tal said, we've been doing this for 4 years now. So some of that is consciousness raising. So educating faculty and clinical instructors and also students and peers has been very important and powerful. Re-examining some of the assumptions about how our training should occur. And we can go more into that later if you like. And then also building a supportive community for people who have disabilities. That's been a big thing that I've heard from so many of our participants, is that we need community. We need support from one another, and we need to give support to one another. So we have an online module called the DREAM module that we've started to that end. And then sort of those longer term implications of this work is that we want to combat the injustice faced by people with disabilities. As Tal shared, there's a huge underrepresentation of people who have disabilities in the health and human service professions. Also looking at universal design of curriculum. So trying to push that universal design principle even within these professional programs. And of course, increasing the diversity of the healthcare providers, that's going to benefit the wider community. And that's going to allow people to see someone maybe who has a similar experience to them in a position of a health or human service care provider. So of course we want to acknowledge the Inclusive Campus team at UBC, as well as our international collaborators. Our participants, I really want to especially acknowledge them for taking the time and having the courage to share their stories. And the Teaching and Learning Enhancement Fund at the University of British Columbia helped to fund some of this work, as did CIHR. And that brings us to the end of this portion. And remember, you can hold your questions. I'm happy to share at the end about my own experience as someone with a disability in education and also in practice. And by the way, while Michael Lee gets ready, I'll let you know you can also tweet me at LYBOT, and I'm happy to respond via Twitter as well. And we'll pass it over to Michael Lee.
All right. Thank you so much, Tal and Laura. It's been very interesting and exciting to hear the bigger picture that university students are facing with. In particular, seeing how students with various kind of disability being impacted by the system itself one way or the other. So thank you so much for doing that. I think one thing that really kind of resonates really well with me when you folks are presenting is talking about like how the non-visible disability actually impacting on students. And that become like more profound, especially because in fact it's such an invisible or non-visible situation. So what I want to do for the next around like half an hour or so is actually looking at like how mental illness or mental health concern actually impact on students' learning as well. In particular, we know actually mental illness and mental health concern is actually one of those like non-visible conditions that oftentimes impacting on our learners. So for the next couple of minutes, I'll just walk you through quickly as to a project that we've been working on and exploring ways and strategies as to how we can actually support students to enhance and to promote their better mental health and better mental well-being as well. So to make it a little bit more interactive and make it more fun, I will have to ask Regina to help me to move on with some of the survey questions that we need to do as well. So the first question I'm going to ask you folks is, would you agree or disagree, or kind of what range that you'd be thinking of that you have the skills to enhance student well-being through your teaching practices? Now, I know that not all of you being teachers per se, but I want you to think kind of very openly or kind of creatively, even if you are not kind of like a teacher, but even as a clinicians, do you have the skills to enhance students' well-being through your practice? I see lots of good responses at this point. Having a quick glance at the screen, I see most of you kind of inkling between like 7 and an 8, saying that yes, you kind of like agree, quite strongly agree, but not overtly kind of or exaggeratedly kind of agree on it. So good. So let's move on to the next question. Again, I ask you to respond to it and have to ask Regina to help me to move on. The next questions that I want to ask is, you believe that faculty members are responsible for supporting students' well-being on a scale of 10, 10 being strongly agree and 0 being like strongly disagree. So do you think that faculty members are responsible for supporting students' well-being, or should that be someone else's job? Thank you to those who've been responding. I see a fair amount of responses at this point, so I'll give you like another 2 or 5 seconds to put in your final bit. And at this point, I see kind of majority of you voting between like 8 and 10, which is indicating that yes, you do believe that faculty members have a role to play and responsible for supporting student well-being. Very good. So let's move on to the third question as well, which Regina will be putting it out for us again. So the question I'm asking you is, you are knowledgeable regarding the impact of mental health and well-being on learning. So think about it. If you happen to be an instructor or teacher, are you aware of it? Or if you happen to be a clinician or supervising students sometimes, are you aware of or knowledgeable regarding the impact of mental health and well-being on learning? Wow, it is very encouraging to see that majority of us actually voting between like 9 and 10, which indicating that actually we are doing pretty good and you are very knowledgeable on the impact of mental health and well-being on learning. So coming to the last question, and again I have to ask Regina to put out the next question for us. The question I have is, you are knowledgeable about teaching practice that promote student well-being. So talking about like your knowledge about like ways to promote student well-being through teaching. Again, I see lots of good responses, and thank you to those who responded so far. And if you haven't cast your vote yet, I'll give you another 5 more seconds to put your final bit, and we will look at how's the outcome at this point. Right, okay, at this point, I see most of you actually voting between like 5 and 7. Not as strong as our earlier vote, but indicating that yes, you do have confidence that you know quite a bit about like teaching practice and how that impact on student well-being. Thank you so much. We'll hold on to those votes at this point. We will come back and revisit them as we go along as well. So thank you, Regina. We will move back onto our next screen. So sounds like actually we do know that students actually facing quite a bit of like stresses or mental health issues. This is true in particular for students with like higher education or going through university education at this point. Just to give you a snapshot as to how students been experiencing mental health issues at this point. We did a survey 2016, not too long ago, and look at how students kind of rate their own mental well-being and mental health issues that they're facing with throughout their whole kind of learning time. 60% of our students saying that yes, they're experiencing stress one way or the other in the past year. Surprisingly enough, we have 45% of students mentioning that they are experiencing anxiety. I used the word and kind of surprising enough. It seems that the amount of anxiety or the number of people experiencing anxiety actually higher than the rate of like general population, which usually would be like around 20%. Looking at depression, again, 31% of our students say that they've been experiencing depression in the past years, especially during the exam time. Again, when you compare to kind of the general norm, which tend to be like 1 out of 5, we're actually seeing a little bit higher than the normal usual population. What is that telling us? Definitely, this is not new to most of us. We know that students, especially like university students, are facing with lots and lots of stress and are experiencing lots of mental health issues while they are journeying through their learning process with us in the university. So the next few slides kind of explain to you as to what we have done in the past couple of years to address mental health issues on campus. Our project started in 2012, and we have done a series of studies and investigations to look at what are the mental health needs of our students. Unlike usual research process that we have subjects or participants to give us information, we actually involve students to be our co-researchers to direct the research process, as well as to answer and respond to the research questions, so that we actually provide opportunity for students to voice their opinion in a very open and candid way as well. So in the past couple of years, we've been using various ways to increase the students' mental health awareness among students, faculty, and staff. We also try to advance on-campus mental health services and resources by sharing students' findings and their opinions on what mental health services they need to have. We also been promoting mental health resources and services, and also trying to create a healthier campus and a community. Now we're also working towards like improving teaching practices. Given that we don't have enough time to walk through everything, I invite you to come to visit our website, which is mhna.ubc.ca. In that particular website, we provide you with some of the synopsis as to what we have done in the past couple of years, in particular using the participatory action research to look into student mental health needs and how we've been addressing some of those needs as well. Based on the findings that we collected in 2012 to 15, we're now moving towards another project which is focusing on teaching practice and student mental health. In the past 2.5 years, we've been looking at various aspects of student mental well-being and looking at how faculty, staff, and the university at large can support student well-being. Whoops, I think I lost a slide in here, so that's why I was paused for a second. What we have done between 2015 to 17 was that in 2015, we conducted a campus-wide survey to solicit undergraduate students' experience as to how they've been experiencing mental health issues in their studies. We also, based on that finding, conducted a series of focus group and interviews with students to investigate and to look at what teaching practices actually impact and promote their mental health well-being. Through the undergraduate experience survey, which is a campus-wide survey, We also ask students to nominate faculty members and TAs who've been supporting their mental health well-being as well. Through that process, we identified faculty members who are identified being supportive and using different strategies to help and address student well-being. That also generated a list for us to actually approach those faculty members as well as TAs to ask them, so what kind of magic wand you've been waving to help and support student well-being? Based on all the finding, now we're actually doing a lot of knowledge translation and training sessions, offering to both faculty members, both tenure track as well as pre-tenure, and also to sessional instructors as well. And we are also in the process of launching and delivering some kind of knowledge translation to TAs as well, in order to support them to better support the teaching and learning process. We are doing that both at the departmental level, at the faculty level, as well as at the campus level as well, with the intent to catch everybody as much as we can, to share some of the findings and the magical wand that other faculty members have been waving to address their learners' well-being. So let us spend a moment to look at what are some of the findings, or what are some of the magic wands that we've been learning through this process. Students told us loud and clear that their well-being and learning are best supported when they feel a sense of connection and social belonging. That sense of belonging and connection is not just only between a peer-to-peer, which we know quite well, but actually students telling us very loud and clear that they want to connect with faculty members, teachers, and TA as well, so that they know their teachers not as someone far away, but actually someone who can share day-to-day life with them, someone as a human being that they can connect with. The second message we are hearing from students was that their well-being and learning are best supported when they feel a sense of connections and a social, am I speaking again to what I'm saying? Maybe I'm just repeating myself again. So, moving on to the next slide, is that actually students, in effect, they will be best supported when the learning and the motivation to learn is best supported by having a very structured and effective course being delivered. For example, knowing the exam date and assignment date beforehand. Don't drop us a surprise, but we want to know ahead of time as to how we can plan and schedule our time better. Maybe deliver the course material in a more effective way. Instead of having materials all over the place and giving me handout one day and then enlist you the other day, can you provide us with syllabus or online materials that can be accessed throughout the whole course in one particular locations? Students are also telling us that in fact they want support not just only during the class time, but also outside the class time as well. Students find that actually within an hour or 2 hours classes would be effective to learn something, but should they have problems or questions they want to ask, it would be better if they can actually come and visit the faculty members or TAs during office hours. We've been hearing that again and again from students that they love having office hours. But at the same time, they said, you know what? Office hours is critical and helpful. But we also want to have more casual connection with our faculty members throughout the office hours as well. Students, in effect, not just only knowing you as a person, but also knowing about your passion, so that I can relate learning to the subject matter, so that I can see the relevance as to why I'd be learning all these things as well. So students really treasure and enjoy having interaction with faculty and knowing as to why they love the topic so much, so that they can relate the learning back to their real life. Now that we talk about a few ideas, so I also want to kind of invite you the other one that I forgot to mention, which now I have to catch up a little bit, is that student mentioned in fact their well-being is enhanced when they are supported holistically. What they really refer to in here is that they want us as faculty members or as teachers to recognize that in fact they have life outside academics. They want us to talk about the well-being topics in the class and to talk about how they can actually have a more balanced life as well. They want us to create a safe classroom environment so that in fact they can talk about like different issues in a safe way as well. They also ask us that if there are any particular issues that might be triggering their emotions, give them a heads up so that they know in fact something might be coming along, so that they can respond to it and handle some of their emotion in a better way. Yet at the same time, as what we mentioned as well, they said in fact they need to be supported as a whole person. We know, as a matter of fact, many of our students are actually doing part-time jobs outside. They have a family to take care of. They have other issues or relationship issues that they need to address outside the classroom as well. And those are the things that happen any time of their life, not according to the classroom schedule, nor the examination schedule as well. So students ask us, be understanding and be supportive should life issues arise. So I guess I've been kind of presenting a few of the findings, and I hope some of those findings kind of echoes with your experience, no matter you're a clinician, as a faculty members, or even teaching student in the clinical settings. Now at this point, I invite you to share some of your thoughts. Do you have any particular strategies that you've been using in supporting students holistically? You've been having any particular thoughts or ideas in terms of how to support their learnings and how to help them to be reconnected or connected to the class as well. Should you have any thoughts, any ideas, any magic wands that you want to share, feel free to type so that we can actually kind of read out your ideas and then we can share it with other folks as well. While you are typing, and if you're interested in some of our work that we've been doing, I invite you to come to actually visit our website as well. Well, with the all kind of high tech in here, I have to go back to some of the low tech thing, which is a piece of paper in front of you, hiding away from the piece of paper. This is actually the websites that we've been created, sharing some of our findings. And you can actually visit us with the website, either typing in the URL, which is our blog.ubc.ca/teaching and wellbeing. Or if you happen to have one of the smartphones with you, you might want to pull it out and scan this barcode, which will actually effectively bring you to our blog and the website, and you can actually look at it and read through our postings and some of our thoughts during the time that you have a moment. All right, again, if you want to scan this barcode, and we'll bring you to the website, or you can actually type in our website, which is blogs.ubc.ca/teaching and wellbeing. If you want to look at this barcode again, let us know. We can share it with you. Or if not, we will kind of come back to you later on as well. I can see that many of you have been sharing some of your thoughts, some of the ideas. So we will actually be kind of addressing those as time goes, as we have a little bit more time as well. Agree with you, Regina. I'm so pleased to see people kind of coming back to talk about RAP as well. Actually, one thing that we as faculty members have been talking about is actually helping students to learn as to how to integrate RAP into our kind of daily life as learners as well, in order to be proactive and to address some of the stressful moment that they may be experiencing, and helping them to actually come up with a wellness plan when issues arise. So thank you so much, Melanie, for sharing that particular opinion. And thank you, Laura, for posting a question in here as well. You are sharing your thoughts with us about like retroactive accommodation, i.e. accommodations requested and provided after the exam or assignment is due. I share your sentiment that oftentimes mental illness often have fluctuating symptoms, and sometimes having like a retroactive kind of accommodation could be helpful. We know that would be helpful, but at the same time, mindful of the fact that in fact there are some policies and guidelines on how to provide best accommodation in the fair way. There could be a technical challenge to actually provide like retroactive support. So maybe that might be something we can actually kind of bring out a little bit more discussion later on when we have more time. Oh, I noticed that Brenda, you said in fact we have lost some. So at this point in time, I just want to double check to see, is this like a generic problem to most of our audience?
Okay.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Danica, for telling us that it's going. So Brenda, you may want to double check your voice or your speaker, and that might be kind of individual issues. But if there's anything that we can help, just let us know as well. All right, thank you so much for sharing some of your thoughts. Remember at the beginning of my talk, I did ask you to share some of your thoughts with us or some of your rating with us, and most of us been kind of rating kind of highly on most of the areas. But at this point, I want you to kind of revisit some of the questions that we asked you earlier, and to ask you to kind of rethink now in the context of what we have talked about. The question that I'm going to ask you again is, do you think that you have the skills to enhance student well-being through your teaching practice? It could relate to you as a teacher, to you as a clinician, to you as a clinical supervisor, or as a clinical educator as well. And I trust in fact there are policymakers sitting in the room, there are academia sitting in the room as well. So in your particular context, no matter what kind of jobs that you're working on, do you think that you have the skills and the ability to enhance students' well-being through your teaching, through whatever the capacity that you have in your role to support student well-being? Thank you. I see lots of good responses at this point, and thank you, Regina, for kind of broadcasting the result. I see actually like 44% or above rating as 9, and adding up 9 and 10, we have almost like 60% of you saying that yes, we do have the skills. I appreciate kind of your response, in particular, knowing that actually a lot of those skills are not like hard rocket science skills. Those are the skills that we know of, in particular for many of us being clinicians. We know that actually those are the skills that we have, and we can actually better support our learners. So moving on to the next question. You believe that faculty members are responsible for supporting students' well-being. In particular in here, faculty members could be in a broader sense, including like clinical supervisors, clinical educators, or for you as a administrator, as an academia. So do you think that you have the role in supporting students' well-being? So I invite you to cast your vote at this point. Thank you. Thank you to those who've been casting your vote. I'll give you like, again, 5 more seconds to put your bits in and to see where you think you are in terms of your responsibility for enhancing or ensuring your learners' well-being. Thank you very much, and Regina, for kind of sharing the results with the rest of the group as well. I see like majority of you, actually again, around like 55% of you saying that yes, this is our responsibility, and you've been voting it in a very high rate. You've been voting either as a 9 or as a 10, believing that yes, faculty members or us actually have the responsibility of supporting students' well-being. Thank you very much for casting the vote, Now let's move on to the third questions that I asked earlier. And again, I asked you to cast your vote as well. That by now you think that you are knowledgeable regarding the impact of mental health and well-being on learning. So now that you know that, or you heard that actually mental health actually have a profound or have an impact on student learning. So I invite you to cast your vote as Regina opening the voting for us at this point. Okay. Thank you. I see many of you casting your votes already. So again, I give you another 5 more seconds if you haven't had a chance to cast your votes yet. Thank you so much for your vote. Now Regina is going to kind of share the finding with all of us. Wow, and again, as you can see, actually we have around like 60% of you saying that yes, you do believe that that we are knowledgeable regarding the impact of mental health and well-being on learning, and we know that actually mental health has a big impact on our learners' ability to learn. So come to our final question, which we are asking that you are knowledgeable about teaching practice that promotes student well-being. In the past little while, we asked you and we shared with you some of the strategies or some of the magic wands that different people have been waving, and we said that those are like strategies that can be used. So at this point, we ask you to kind of let us know whether or not you feel you are knowledgeable about teaching practices. Again, thank you so much, Regina, for kind of doing the poll. At this point, we are going to open and share the results with all of you. Wow, this is like very good outcome. We see actually many of you saying that yes, I do know about the teaching practices that promote student well-being. Now I have to say, in fact, in my earlier presentation, I didn't really share too much with you on exactly what strategies that we're doing, but just to give you a broad highlight as to some of the broad areas that how you can do. But as I said earlier, actually we do have a website that we invite you to visit, and if Regina can turn us back to the screen, this is the website that we'd like to invite you to come and visit us. As actually in that website, we do have a particular link to our tool that actually lists out different ways of different teaching strategies that student and faculty members have been finding very helpful. I know the print will be too small for you to look at this point, but we do actually invite you to come to our website, and from there you can actually download the whole brochure, and we'll give you the list of all the strategies that we identified in here. Just a small caveat in here, this is not meant to be like a checklist to make sure that you do everything and then put a check mark on everything. No, this is not, but this is actually more a reflective tool to help you to think, is this a particular approach that will be useful, appropriate in my teaching context? May it be in a classroom, in a small group discussion, or in a clinical teaching situation when you are kind of teaching student one-on-one, or in the middle of a student kind of interacting with your clients. So these will serve as a good guideline for you to ponder, not necessarily in the middle of teaching, but rather maybe after the session, when you sit down, reflect on how you've been teaching or preparing your next session. It might be a good checklist for you to think about how can I actually prepare my class for the next time as well. So again, I do invite you to come and to visit our website, and thank you, Regina, for typing the website in there. So by all means, come to our website and download stuff or post a few questions. We will be monitoring that website on an ongoing basis. If you have any thoughts, any ideas that you want to share with us, we'd be happy to respond and interact with you through that website as well. With that note, again, I want to thank all of you for participating in our sharing. At the same time, I also need to acknowledge the kind contribution of the Teaching and Learning Enhancement Fund, which allow us to launch into this particular study in the past 5 years. At the same time, I also owe the big thank you and kudos to students, staff, and faculty who've been tirelessly contributed to this project and enabling us to actually find out so much about our students' needs, as well as how we can actually enhance their well-being through learning and teaching. At this point, I think we will open up the forum and invite folks to post questions and to share thoughts with us so that we can have a little bit more interaction together.
So what a wonderful presentation. Thanks so much, Michael and Tal and Laura. That was just really, really great. A very rich, I think, journey into many different aspects, both, you know, an academic look at the issue and a powerful theming of the issues at hand, and then a very practical look at what some of the teaching, you know, the implications are for teaching. And I guess I heard very much that it's the beauty or the gift is in really, I guess, helping us all be seen, helping our students be seen, be heard, and be present with people. So I guess for many of us who've worked in mental health practice, I guess they're core ideas. Thanks, Tal, for that. That's really great. Great. So the connection to the blog is just right there. So I didn't need to type that in. So thank you. So Melanie, you have a question here, and I will go through that. But first, maybe I can ask Laura. One of the things that was curious to me, because on this website we always talk about language, don't we? And we often talk about how we speak about people receiving services. And so I'll just pose the first question to Laura, if I may. She often mentioned the notion of disabled people. And I think that really we often talk about language, person first language from the World Health Organization. And I know that Laura will have some special things to tell us about just how she comes to use that term that will, I'm sure, contribute to our conversation. And then we'll go to the question. So if I may ask Laura, please, to just maybe say a few words of that. I'm going to turn my audio on, and if you can turn your audio.
All right. So thank you, Regina. I was hoping I could explain that a little bit. So I've gone from across the gamut about language and what kind of language is best to use. So often here in North America especially, you encounter person-first language. So for a long time that's also what I used. But more recently, I've moved to using what I call identity-first language. So to me, having a disability, being a person with a disability or a disabled person, that is a positive aspect of my identity. So I wouldn't say I'm a person who's a woman. Just like I don't say I'm a person who has a disability, because I consider being a disabled person a positive identity factor. So I like to put that identity first and forefront it as something positive. But I really acknowledge that that is not everyone's language choice. And so it's important for us when we are working with people to learn from them. What kind of language do they prefer? So in short, that's a little bit around the language piece.
I would just add that a person with a disability, you put the disability within the person, and when you say a disabled person, then the onus or the responsibility is in the environment that disabled the person. So that's why I also prefer disabled person rather than person with a disability.
So, Katal, I guess you come from that disability model, and that's what shapes. So, I guess I just really wanted to bring this up because I think we often talk about language, and that seemed a prime opportunity to just maybe begin to revisit some of those things. So, what I love about language is it's always alive, isn't it? So, you think you get it right, and then the whole thing kind of, oh, well, maybe we need to revisit that. So, it's just, I think it's as, you know, as practitioners, I think just keeping ourselves alive to those things really, I think, helps us situate our conversations.
And I think across the world, mostly the European countries, they use disabled person rather than a person with disability. I think probably mostly Northern America, is the only place where you use a person with a disability.
Isn't that curious?
Yes.
Michael, you had some things to add, I think?
I agree with you in the way that the language is something that keep evolving, and I think now we're coming to the stage that we're now having a slightly different understanding and conceptualization as to what the people with disability versus like disabled people kind of having different connotation and understanding as well. So I think we as clinicians, we as like faculty, we as service provider as well as service recipient, we need to be mindful of how all these concepts been evolving. And I think this is one of the things that would actually enable us to be more at the edge, to know how best to respond to the evolutional process.
Cool. So Michael, since you're just speaking, maybe you'd be interested in responding first to Melanie's idea, who asks, what are some of the strategies you recommend for supporting student wellness in a career college setting with accelerated learning and a variety of part-time instructions? It is not as ideal, but likely creative ways to ensure instructors are still being mindful. So that's a really big question, isn't it? Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. I think this is a very big question. In particular, kind of giving us the context that in a career college setting, it will be like a little bit more kind of focus on skill acquisition, focus on like precision, and on top, we likely have students more on a part-time basis, as well as instructors being on a part-time basis as well. So that actually kind of making the situation more complicated and complex. That being said, I think the same notion will still applies. On one hand, we need to know that students kind of have life outside school as well. In particular, I believe for like career college setting, we likely have students kind of doing part-time study, doing part-time job, or even like a full-time job, but part-time studies, and at the same time having a family to take care of, having other kind of life commitments. So that would be something that we need to be very mindful of. So how can we actually help students to balance their life so that study will not just overtake everything? But at the same time, if you also point out another very important point is, unlike some other kind of academic situation or institution, that you have like regular full-time faculty members being very mindful of the needs of students. Whereas in your situation, you might have like people more on a part-time basis coming in and now leaving after this term, and a new person coming in for the next term. So training and orientation become very critical and crucial. What we are now doing or trying to do, and we have to admit that we are not doing a perfect job at this point yet, is actually to try to catch new faculty members as much as we can and as quick as we can. We also realize the importance of like just-in-time learning. We can bombard all kinds of knowledge to people. However, just-in-time learning will really make things to be more applicable and meaningful to our faculty members and teachers as well. So now we're trying to create like very brief, quick, but succinct kind of informatics, like video clips or like broadcasts that we can actually share with faculty members as to these are like quick tips as to how you can actually enable and address some of the students' needs. So knowing that everybody kind of living in a very kind of high-speed rushing life, we need to make sure that message get across to both students as well as to our faculty members, teachers, in a very effective and quick way.
Thank you, Michael. Anybody others to add? No? So maybe I'll just weigh in on this a little bit as well. So it's Regina speaking in the corner, but probably many of you know that I work with Douglas College and so manage a graduate diploma course. So much like that, people have big lives outside school. I do find that just having that personal connection, I feel very fortunate because we have a cohort of 25 people often, but just that personal connection where people feel safe and they're able to tell you things, early, so that it just doesn't build up and then people sort of miss class and then it just accumulates. And then, I really try to reach out to people early and say, well, I've noticed maybe you've not been posting because our course is online, which adds a little bit more complexity. But it's like, is there anything that I can do to support or help you? So I think just reaching out to and just kind of noticing, well, maybe that person didn't hand in that assignment or not posting, but just reaching out and say, may we help you in any way? And I found that that's really try to sort of get around some of the issues that in the past when I haven't been as aware of that they've just sort of built a little bit, and then we have to backtrack a little bit, but it just seems to help us all in our desire to support students.
Interesting, Regina, you mentioned that. If you can bear with me for like putting in little thoughts in here as well as actually the online course bring in another complexity. As actually we are not really seeing the person face to face, and that make the connection a little bit harder as well. That being said, at the same time, actually sometimes online communication actually create another safe place. That because of like not seeing face to face, and that enhance communication better as well. And that also kind of create a flexibility for our learners to participate at their own time and at their own pace as well.
Right. Yeah. Yes.
I'll just add in something interesting. Chatting with some people I'm working on another project with. But for people who are blind or partially blind, we don't pick up as much on body language and facial expressions. And so in this conversation, they were like, oh yeah, I really like the online stuff because I'm on an equal playing field because no one's reading body language, as long as the platform's accessible to assistive technology, of course.
Yeah, that technology, that's a whole other big long story we could have, isn't it? Yes.
I've heard also, we participated in a conference in SFU a couple of weeks ago, and someone also said they're using mindfulness in classes. So she actually starts her class, every class she starts with a 5 minutes mindfulness exercise for the students to sort of, make sure they're focused and bring good energy to the class. So that's another technique that people can apply.
That's neat.
I like what you say actually, Tal, you're talking about like mindfulness. Lately I've been using this particular technique, not just only in class, but actually mainly prior to exam as well. So I invite my students to come to the class like 5 minutes before the exam time, and actually we do like a little bit of a mindfulness exercise together in order to reduce some of the stress and make it as an invite. If you folks don't want to come, that's totally fine. It is only an invite if you want to join me, and we can do that 5 minutes before the exam time. And actually, as it turned out, many students came. And as a matter of fact, I think I have to do kind of more a randomized control study in here. The space and students are actually doing slightly better than what it used to be as well.
It's interesting because my experience at the University of Victoria in social work there, that was the culture. Every class we started with a grounding exercise of some kind and a check-in. And it really shifted the culture of the entire program. And then they also developed online resources so that for the classes that were online, we still had the resources and students could still access that and do that.
Cool.
So that refers also to Melanie's question, because if it's a culture within the institution, then it doesn't matter whether you're a new instructor, part-time, full-time, everyone needs to start with some kind of exercise, then it sort of changed the whole culture of the whole institution. Somebody might ask about referring to...
So we're just mindful of time. It's 11:52, and we do want to get to Abby's question. Thank you for being so very patient. I appreciate it. Abby, you note that we didn't mention referring students with mental health issues to student health services, and I'm sure our team will have much to add to that as well. I'm not sure who would like to talk about that.
I can try to respond and also invite kind of the rest of the panel as well as people online to kind of share some of your thoughts as well. In my presentation, I didn't really kind of highlight the student health services. As actually my approach at this point is try to be more at the health promotion, prevention aspect, rather than actually kind of dealing with the issue. Of course, I know there are many occasions that our learners actually run into issues that need like immediate help and support. And I try to offer that support as much as I can as well. There will be occasions that I literally have to walk some of my beloved learners to counseling services or even to student health service right away. And having kind of faculty members walking them to the services actually sometimes will speed up the waiting time so that they can actually get service a little bit quicker. But at the same time, I'm so mindful of like giving my learners kind of choices whether or not they want to take up these kind of offers as well. As by the end of the day, it is their choice, and I want to make sure that I'm not superimposing my options and my decisions. In particular, being very mindful of the power difference between me as a teacher and they as a student. And I really hate to kind of see that kind of the difference between like me and they. But as a matter of fact, in fact, that's the reality as a teacher versus like a student as well.
No, just that we do have a handout that lists all the resources on campus. So if we as faculty have a student who comes to us with some issues or a crisis, then we are able to refer them to To those resources, and we also have I forgot the name of we have a platform where there is a very
The early alert?
yeah, the
Yeah.
early alert, where if there is something really extreme, then there's an early alert where we send a note to the center, and they would contact us to take care of them. Yeah.
Wow. All right, I think you have something going on there. Have you? You something to add? No.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, I wanted to mention early alert, and then also just highlight something I think Michael also said around the importance of negotiating disclosures.
Yeah.
That is so key because we don't want someone to feel more unsafe.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with you, Laura. I think it's very important, and I keep kind of reminding myself that that sometimes, I mean, when students really take a step to come and speak to us, I mean, I want to acknowledge in fact they are very courageous to do that. It's never an easy thing to disclose or to share kind of the issue with faculty members whom they notify. I mean, they are in a position of power. So I think in fact the other thing that I also want to kind of mention briefly in here is how can we as instructors, as TA or as teachers, be mindfully kind of empowering our students to come forward and to share their concern and well-being with us as well. Throughout our project studies, I mean, we realize it is a very, very difficult and touchy topic to talk about mental health issues. I mean, it always put our learners in a very vulnerable positions. And I think earlier, Regina, you mentioned about creating a safe environment. That is very key and critical as well. How can we actually let our students know that this is not about competition. This is not about your grade. This is about your learning, and this is about your growth and development, so that one day when you graduate, you can help people whom you're going to help.
And that's perhaps because we're speaking about a professional designation, right? So we're training people to be occupational therapists in this particular context. And I think sometimes when I look at my daughter who goes to a class where there's 500-600 people, then that's a little bit of a different context as well, isn't it?
And I think, and maybe we need to close, but something that helps in both those contexts is to give everyone the tools and the resources. So making sure that we're telling all of our students, like, this is what's available in terms of disability support services, accommodations, student health and wellness initiatives, and that kind of thing. And giving it to everyone, so it's not, oh, I think you might need this, but it's, we all need this at some point.
I'm so pleased you ended there, because as we were having this conversation, I was just thinking universal design. So you brought us back full circle, so I really appreciate that. Just want to say thanks, Parminder, for your kind words. That's very sweet of you. Let's maybe close. We're at 11:57, so we've gone full time today. Just want to say a big thank you to our speakers. I'll start with Mr. Michael Lee here on the right, with Dr. Tal Yaris. Really big thank you to Laura Bulk, soon to be Dr. Laura Bulk. Thank you so much to each and every one of you, and thank you for your contribution to learning in higher education. I think you are really steamrolling a new path for some things that we likely should be doing. So a big thank you to you all for that.
Thank you, Regina.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
and
so
thank
much.
you all for joining us and your great questions.
And I know that time is running out, but however, as what we said, that we do have websites and blogs that we invite you, and Twitter as well, and we do invite you to continue to communicate with us, so that we no longer work in silos, but actually work together to try to create a healthier and better environment for our learners, and to promote kind of better well-being for everyone as well. So please do join us one way or the other, and we would love to hear more from you on an ongoing basis as well. So thank you for allowing us this opportunity to link up with you and to connect with you one way or the other.
So you'll be hearing from us with a certificate and a request for some feedback. I will do that in the next hour or so. So hopefully you'll get that on your desk soon. Thanks again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you for our upcoming wrap sessions.